The Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, as it's known, has recommended that AstraZeneca only be administered to people over the age of 60. People under 60 will now be offered Pfizer. For more on this, I'm joined by Professor Julie Leask from the University of Sydney. Julie, thanks so much for this. The risk of clotting is so small, but the damage to vaccine hesitancy with this decision seems pretty high. So can you explain why it was necessary?
Yeah, hi Laura. So first, I actually think it might not be quite as high as we imagine because we're already used to the idea that this particular vaccine can cause this rare serious syndrome. I know that the basis of this decision, as stated by the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, is that it was what the evidence is saying now. And so they're responding to new evidence that shows that the rate of the clotting syndrome in the 50 to 59-year-old age group has increased slightly. So in absolute terms, it's not a massive increase, but it's enough to just tip the acceptability of that risk in that age group over the threshold because we don't have a lot of COVID right now in Australia.
So basically, the experts have decided that the risk of Australians under 60 dying from a blood clot is higher than of them dying of COVID. And that's not entirely comforting, I might say.
It's very rare for death to come from this clotting. It's about in the order of 5 to 25%. We're dealing with really small numbers here, which is why they're a bit jumpy. The issue is that people can it's a serious syndrome. Most people will go to hospital, they'll get treated and they'll recover and be able to go home, but it can still be quite serious. So that's why they're saying that risk is not acceptable to impose on that age group at the rates that we're now seeing in that age group. Still rare, about just under 3 per 100,000. But when we don't have much COVID in the country, that becomes an unacceptable risk. So it's just about balance here, really.
Indeed. Now, there are 3.8 million AstraZeneca doses that have been administered in Australia. 800,000 of those are first jabs only. So what do you propose those people in that category do?
So for those who've already had an AstraZeneca vaccine, particularly, the 50 to 59-year-old age group, like me, can go on to have their second AstraZeneca vaccine 3 months later because the risk of clotting from the overseas data appears to be smaller for the second dose. And so it's recommended that we still have that second dose. It's very important because it will bring our immunity up to a good level that we need for protection from COVID. And we know that some people are concerned about having that second dose, but remember that if you've gone into having the first dose, you've already looked at a rare risk of clotting, and you've decided still to vaccinate. Well, that risk is even smaller according to the evidence that we have now.
My mum, among the many people with just one dose under their belt, asking that very question this morning. So there's the answer for you. Go out and get your second dose. The risk is still very small. Just finally, can I ask you, Peter Collignon did write this week that he believes that once 70% of adults in Australia are fully vaccinated, we need to then start to learn to live with the virus. Do you agree?
Yeah, we've got to maintain the balance between, we don't want Fortress Australia where we close down for too long, but we don't want to open up and let it rip. So we need to have good protection of people in Australia. We need to reduce the chance of the virus jumping from person to person by having a lot of us vaccinated. What that threshold is, I'll look to the infectious disease modelling, but it will be at least 70, maybe 80%, so that we can open up in a reasonable way and in a safe way, but we will have to accept that there will be outbreaks in the future.
Indeed. Do you think that the government and leaders should be starting to have that conversation with Australians now? It doesn't seem to be happening.
Yes, I do. We need to all together be thinking about what our future looks like in Australia. The government have that kind of information on hand to be able to at least look at the different scenarios we might expect in the future and to start having that open, transparent conversation with Australians so that we have a realistic outlook that we can all together discuss and agree on what's the best balance between opening up and staying safe.